it going, y'all? It is, of course, your boy Raymond back up in here with another review video. And of course, you guys already saw the title of this video, okay? It has been the long awaited Black Midi album, Cavalcade. We're here to review it. I know you guys are super excited to hear my thoughts about it and to just to see, like, you know, people talking about this album, especially on the internet. I think this album, first of all, I think this album is incredible. I think it is very groundbreaking in terms of the rock genre, and also just for prog rock bands everywhere. I feel like this is going to be that one album that in like 5 years from now, people are going to be looking back on like, oh yeah, these guys were the real innovators of the genre going forward. And they were the real innovators of the genre, like right now even. I think Black Midi currently stands as probably one of like my favorite bands, if not my favorite band out right now. They've just impressed me so much with their musical palette, with their creativity, with their subject matter and a lot of the tracks that they talk about, going into subject matter that is super dark, super introspective, and also just questions about the world that no one would ever seem to ask unless you were like mentally insane. Let's just dive into it. It's Black Midi, it's Cavalcade, the new album, and yeah, what more else is there to say? Let's go ahead and dive right in. Obviously, we start off with the first track, which is John L. I know you guys loved my John L reaction video. It's up on the channel. It's almost got like 2,000 views or something like that. So I know you guys absolutely loved that video. It's probably my highest viewed video on the channel, so thank you guys so much for that. We start off the album with John L, which is just such an insane opening track. It really brings you into the world and into the environment that Cavalcade is trying to put you in, and it really sort of brings you into the sound of what Black Midi is going to be giving you for the whole length of the album. Subject matter has to do with a lot of like cult leaders, overthrowing cult leaders, sort of being what it is to sort of follow a higher god, a higher entity, stuff like that, and then also being betrayed by that entity. Jordy is sort of trying to also parallel it to like religion in a way, in my opinion. The track is just super aggressive, super in your face, but it also is extremely technical. There's a lot of slow parts, there's a lot of quick in your face parts with a lot of these really aggressive guitar rhythms, but then it also takes its time during its soothing parts, and it just is such like a mixed bag of a track, and I think that's like the perfect way to open up this album, to be honest. And then from there we immediately get sort of like this other end of the spectrum with Marlene Dietrich, which is a gorgeous track. I think it's a little bit of an underrated track from what I've seen people talking about this album. I think it's a beautiful ballad. I think it's a great attempt of Black Midi doing a ballad. That's one thing that I actually like about this album more than Schlagenheim, was that a lot of the softer, a lot of the more soothing, classic rocky moments in it, there's so much balladry, and there's so much care and effort into actually putting in for a lot of the softer moments on this album, I think. And this track is probably like the perfect example of that. This whole track almost feels like a short 2 to 3 minute ballad. Marlene Dietrich, I think, is like a reference to some like German or French like actor back in like the 30s or 40s or some shit like that. It's sort of a reference to that, sort of a reference to being overcome by fame, and sort of being overcome by the amount of wealth that you get from portraying yourself as like an actor, as like an icon in a sense. And so it's really interesting that these guys are like maybe just like a little bit older than I am, and they have just completely like gone to topics and to subject matter that most artists don't even really reference or even tackle until they're like towards the end of their career, and they're just coming straight out of the gate with a lot of this dark, heavy, introspective subject matter. And then sort of from there, we hop straight into the two other single tracks, which were Chondro, Malaysia, Patella. Still have No idea how to pronounce that, but luckily I do know what it means. It's essentially like the diagnosis for runner's knee, which adds to the mystery even more, because I have no idea what the title of the track is supposed to mean for the track itself. I guess you could say that with the pacing and with the jarriness of the track itself, I guess you could say it's as if you were like running a marathon, but you were like stopping and going and like tripping over yourself. But I'm not really sure. Like, this track is probably the most bizarre, I would say, out of the whole track list. It sort of feels like a combination of all of the sounds that they're going for on this album, sort of mixed into one. We sort of start off with this like cool little guitar lick opening, and then we get like these really almost like tribal drums towards like the beginning. I did my reaction to this song actually on the channel, so you guys can go ahead and check it out if you want. Yeah, this track is really interesting to come after Marlene, and sort of gives a little bit more, puts you further into the idea that the album is sort of trying to go for here. And then from there, we get straight into slow. After the ending of Patella, going straight into slow is just such a jarring transition, which I guess adds to the effect from Patella, I guess. But we get straight into slow, which honestly, since the songs come out, John L. has really standed as my favorite track on this whole album. But slow, the more I listen to it and the more I take it in, the more I think about the music video especially. I think the music video is really important to this song as well. The more I think about it, I think slow might actually be like up there with John L., if not maybe up there as my favorite song from this album. I think it's really interesting, the subject matter, a really heavy concept of a track here. Analyzing it a little bit more and listening to it just like a whole bunch more times, it just sort of deals with these really heavy topics about, you know, life, is it worth it? Time sort of moves on too slowly, or, you know, just wanting to sort of end your life because you think that your time here on Earth and your life just is like meaningless, and that everything just feels like it's going by so slowly and you're just ready to just leave. It's just such like a depressing track, but at the same time with the instrumentation here, it's just so in your face, and it's just so groovy. As weird as it is to say, like it's probably got like one of my favorite grooves from this whole album. I just think like the bass part that Cameron plays is just amazing. I think that the drums here are really match up with Cameron's bass playing really well, and sort of gives like a really driving rhythm. And I feel like this is the one song where it feels like you're sort of driving in a car in like a storm, and you're just sort of, it's on like you're like on the straightest road possible, and you're just waiting for when the next turn in the road is going to be. Again, my reaction to slow is also on the channel if you guys want to go ahead and check that one out. And then we get into the last half of the album, which is completely new except for two of the tracks which they actually performed on the KEXP live show that they did like about a month ago or something like that. So obviously, any of you guys who watched that, including me, by the way, you guys already have heard Dethroned, and you guys have already heard Hogwash and Boulder Dash. But first, before we get to those two tracks, we do have Diamond Stuff, and the thing about Diamond Stuff that's interesting is that this track feels like it is the most Swans-esque track here. I know Jordy has mentioned in interviews that the band was really inspired by bands like Death Grips, like Swan, stuff like that. So that makes sense. The track starts off for like the first half, really, like the first 3 minutes of the track, with these really eerie, really like terrifying guitar rhythms. It sounds like he's plucking a banjo, I think. I don't know. That banjo is actually a surprise tool that will come in handy later, so be sure to remember that. Essentially, he's like plucking these really eerie string patterns on either his guitar or like a banjo or something. And then once we get towards like the last half of the track, this is when sort of the instrumentation starts to have this really prog rocky-esque swell this wall of sound that starts to envelop like the whole sound of the track towards like the end of it. And it just feels like the most Swans-esque track, even though, I mean, for a Swans track, like, it's only like 6 minutes. So, I mean, even for a Swans track, that's pretty short. It's just a really interesting track. I'd say it's probably still my least favorite track on the album. Not to say that it's bad at all. I just think that the plucking of the guitar at the beginning and the wall of sound that finally hits towards like the end, I just think the buildup is sort of like halts the momentum of the album just like a little bit, just because Chandro, Malaysia Patella, and then Slow are just so energetic and just so driving that it's sort of just the momentum of the album just sort of like hits like a little bit of a halt once you get to this track because of the gradual buildup of like the 6 minutes. I don't know, that could be like the intended purpose, but well, I don't really know. That's just my opinion on it. And then we get into the first of the live tracks that were performed on KEXP, which were Dethroned and Hogwash and Boulder Dash. First of all, Dethroned I think might be one of my favorite tracks on here. I think the gradual buildup of the track and just the embellishing wall of sound that we get towards like the final half of this thing is just so insane. I mean, there is just the horn section, the saxophone, the guitars, the bass, the drums, which again are having like a driving beat to them again, and it's just such like an insane track. It just sort of starts out as this like sort of jazzy, sort of funky opener, and then towards like the latter half, once the guitar comes in, there are just so many pedals that that Cameron and Jordy are using that just sort of engulf like the rest of the track. And then we get like the horn section that sort of comes in, and then the saxophone wailing, which is just awesome. This track is just insane, and I think it's sort of, from what I'm getting from it, I think it sort of goes back to the concept that John L was trying to do with like cult leaders and stuff. Obviously the track's called Dethroned, which makes sense. So I think that and this track and John L sort of tie in together a little bit in terms of the subject matter and in terms of the story that they're trying to portray. And then we get into Hogwash and Boulder Dash, which I think is one of the most interesting cuts on here. And it's just a straight up like in your face banger. Like there's these like clunky, what can almost be described as like somebody hitting pots and pans with like forks and spoons, essentially. Maybe they're supposed to be like cowbells or something, or like bells that go around like the chain of like a cow or something. But yeah, there's those at the beginning, which are also very rhythmic and set the sort of like weird country Kentucky-esque like tone for the track. As soon as the drums come in, they're super driving again, really upbeat, really up pace. The time signature is weird, which just adds to the weirdness of the track already. And then we get this break, and Jordy comes in with what is essentially a banjo, I think. It sounds like a banjo. In the live show that they did, it was just on like his electric guitar. But on here, it literally sounds like he's playing a banjo in the recording. It's a hilarious, but it is also a really cool sound choice for this song, because not only do we get that break where he comes in with the banjo lick, but then we just get like this wall of sound that hits you like at the like straight into your face, like the boom boom bam boom boom bam, like just that insane wall of sound with the horns, with the guitars, with the bass, and with the drums, just straight in your face. Honestly, this song, I have no idea what it means. I just enjoy the sonic palette of this song so much. I just love how in your face it is, that I haven't even really dove into the lyrics of it, really. I'm not really too sure like what it's supposed to really mean. I think this is just more supposed to be like a sonic banger, in my opinion, but I could be wrong. Maybe there's some other stuff that I'm missing in there in the terms of the lyrics that could be more important to the meaning of the track. If you guys have any insight, go ahead and comment it down below, but that's just how I feel about the track. And then from there, we get this hellish transition from the end of Patella in like the last like 2 seconds, where like there's this giant ass wall of sound and distortion that leads straight into the last track, which is Ascending Forth. We start off with with like this little gorgeous guitar like melody ballad thing that Jordy is playing, and I think the subject matter of this track, I think, is one of the most important ones on here in terms of for the future of Black Midi, just because this track really, to me, seems like it's sort of like them talking about the nature of the songwriting process, in my opinion. Sort of talking about the nature of the songwriting process, about how, you know, Jordy just keeps on repeating throughout the track, like, everyone loves ascending fourths, meaning the note ascending fourths, and it seems like he's talking about the nature of songwriting and also musicianship that a lot of these bands coming out now and a lot of these pop stars coming out now, that sort of seems to be the formula that tends to cloud a lot of the other creativity that comes from a lot of these musicians out right now. And so not only is it like a critique of a lot of modern music today, but it is also sort of their mission statement to their fans, saying that, you know, we're gonna be different. This isn't gonna be like just your average band who is just going to be giving you these cookie cutter tracks for our entire discography. No, we're gonna be giving you like the best of our creativity. At least that's how I interpret the track. I think it's a gorgeous track. It starts off with these really nice guitar melodies from Jordy, and then we sort of get into these more beautiful ballad-esque swells, and then towards like the end of the track we get this insane beautiful just build towards like the end of the track, and then we get like this really grand closer for like the last 10 seconds that sort of ties a nice little theatrical bow around the entire album. And it's really pretty. Obviously it ties in with the title Cavalcade, obviously, because it's supposed to be very showy, very theatrical, and this track is definitely that. This album is a lot of things, and this album is just so impressive to me. To come from Schlagenheim, which was just a straight up banger, and sort of this like unknown to a lot of the like the prog rock industry, just like this band, like where would they go from here? This sound is so abrasive, it's so punky, and then we get like the teaser tracks like John L, Slow, all that jazz, and there's like this more jazz influence to it. There's a lot more of like a prog rock influence to it. The sort of punk rock aesthetic of their sound has sort of drifted away and has gone for more of this classical prog rock style of mixing jazz with rock, with industrial music, stuff like that, which I honestly I adore it, and I love the jazz influence on this whole album. I think Jordy even mentioned in an interview that Miles Davis's Bitches Brew was one of the bigger inspirations for this album, and that can definitely be shown on like almost every track here. And just with how short it is, it's only 8 tracks, which is just insanely impressive that they were able to make even more of a statement than they were from Schlagenheim, which I still love. They were able to make more of a statement with less tracks than Schlagenheim was, which is just insane to me. And I just 100% commend the group so much for being able to achieve that. You know, I think it's really rare, and I think it's also really inspiring, especially to a lot of the people who are like my age and like their early 20s, who are really interested in making music and are interested in just listening to music in general, like different kinds of experimental music. I think it's really inspiring to see a bunch of these guys who met in college at an art school, who are like around the same age that I am, to just be out here making some of like the coolest and the most experimental music I've heard of like recent years, to be honest. I just think that's super cool and that's super inspiring. I am actually seeing them in October in LA, so I'm super excited for that, and I couldn't be more excited for this band's future, to be honest. And I absolutely adore this album and what they've been able to accomplish in just the short 3-year span of this band's existence. In terms of a score for this album, I know a lot of people in the music communities and also a lot of people who are just fans of the band in general are probably hoping this is going to be like a 10. I don't know. I just have a few problems with it. Like, I think the build and the progression of Diamond stuff isn't my favorite out of the entire track list. I still think Chandro, Palatium Metella, whatever, I still think that track is a little bit all over the place. While I do enjoy it, I just think like the subject matter of the track doesn't really have much to say. It's just kind of like lost in its own sound, even though I do think that a lot of the passages are really cool. I just think it's sort of like all over the place and doesn't really know where it wants to go that much. Some of the mix of Jordy's voice, where he has like these really echoey vocal manipulations over his voice, I just don't think the mix complements him that much, because I know he mentioned how on this album he was going to be doing a lot more singing and presenting his voice a lot more fluently and a lot more vibrato on this album. And I think mixing him with a lot of these echoey, reverby effects and then drowning him in the mix, I think it makes for like some interesting sound design stuff, because it sounds like his voice is being swallowed by the wall of sound of the other instruments. But at some points I would, like especially in Dethroned and also in Hogwash, I would like to really hear his voice be able to sing, and I would really like to hear what he's able to say on those tracks. But it sounds like his voice just sort of gets lost in the mix and gets engulfed by so much of the instrumentation, which I guess could be part of the design of the track. That could be a part of the design of it. Maybe his voice is supposed to be swallowed by this wall of sound, and that's supposed to be the idea of the track. But for me, I would just like to hear his voice stand out a little bit more in the mix. Just some nitpicky stuff that I personally have from this album that, to be honest, doesn't really affect that much of the album for me. But it is enough to not really see it as something that is really perfect to me. I think for this album, I am going to be giving it a 9.5 out of 10. I know you guys are really going to be adoring this album for like the rest of the year, and also probably the years to come until they release another one, which it sounds like they're about halfway through their third project, so we could be getting that relatively soon, maybe even next year, who knows. But I know you guys really adore this album, and I know you guys are going to be enjoying this review. This is probably going to be like my longest review, just because I had so much to say about every track here. That was Black Midi and Cavalcade. If you have not listened to this album, please go listen to it. Oh my goodness, you are starving yourself of so much amazing music if you do not. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe down below, and be sure to comment down below if you guys have any more thoughts or any more insight on the rest of the album. And yeah, that was pretty much all I had. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.